was undertaken in 9 sites across South Africa, and it was a phase 3 randomized controlled trial, placebo-controlled trial, to evaluate the effectiveness of tenofovir gel in preventing both HIV-1 as the primary endpoint, but also herpes as a secondary endpoint. But the analysis, unfortunately, showed no difference, finally, in the outcome between the tenofovir gel arm and the placebo arm. And this obviously was a disappointment. And so we tried to explore why that should have been. Was it that the women did not use the product, which is one of the challenges we've seen in these trials historically? Was it that the product wasn't effective, or was it a combination of both? In order to understand that, we had 2 measures of adherence. The first was based on talking to the women and getting them to return their applicators, and we developed a formula to see how well those sexual acts had been protected. And in the study, we found on average that women had protected their sex acts between 50 to 60% of the time, according to the protocol, i.e. using 2 gels. We were interested knowing what the results were from the other studies about high adherence being possibly protected. So we were interested in looking at the high adherers in our study. But using that same formula, we found that only 13% of the women were able to use the gel more than 80% of the time. So that means that a small number get this high level of adherence. Most of the women tried to use it, 50 to 60% of the time reported, but that clearly wasn't enough. To look at this in a different way, we looked at tenofovir levels, and these were collected on a quarterly basis through lavage, vaginal lavage. And we had a sub-study, which was a random sample of about 214 women, where we looked at all of these tenofovir levels. We said, did they have tenofovir present, yes or no, and how did that correlate to HIV infection? Now, in that group, we found that 22% of the women had tenofovir in all of their samples. About 65% had it in some of their samples, and only 13% had it in none of their samples. And what that tells us is that in this group, it was a sub-study, 87% of the women altogether tried to use this product. They tried, but they couldn't use it. When we looked further and we looked at tenofovir and HIV incidence, in one analysis we found that in women who had tenofovir present and had had sex in the previous 10 days, that they had about 52% protection in that group compared to women who didn't have tenofovir present, indicating again that women who are high adherers are probably going to get some protection, but you have to be right up there with adherence, probably over 80% of the time. So our conclusion was that in this general population, using the gel like this didn't work, but in a subpopulation, if we look at the tenofovir levels, there's an indication that this product probably does work, but you have to use it consistently and correctly to a very high level. But we need new technologies that are going to fit into these women's lives. And it's not just long-acting. We still need pericoital technologies for many of these women, but they need to be much more forgiving, I think, than we found the tenofovir gel is. It just, even 50 to 60% isn't enough to crack that nut, but we have to think differently about this group of young women.